This is Kelly Hill, technology reporter for RCR Wireless News. I'm here today with Rob Hammond, who is Senior Director of Enterprise Mobility Services at Syniverse. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you so much, Kelly. So pleased to be here.
Great. Well, the holiday season is upon us, and we are going to be talking about some trends in retail, in business intelligence, analytics, and how those things are relevant to mobile. And so I'm hoping you can start us off, Rob, with kind of a sense of, what are some of the overarching trends we're seeing right now, and what is the relevance there to mobile?
You bet. So I think it's such an exciting time. Mobile is retail this year. For the first time, we had actually the tipping point where more online traffic was mobile, from mobile devices on Thanksgiving Day than on just traditional devices. So huge tipping point. And then if you look at the commerce numbers that came out from Black Friday and the long period of time, some of the metrics that came up from the major retailers, online traffic and just the amount of mobile commerce that occurred. It's very topical conversation for us to have what's happening on with retail. But more broadly, when we think about it, particularly for operators, there's such a demand for capacity and such a demand for moving customers and the bandwidth-hungry applications that we're seeing. And then how do we get to those users when they're roaming, or how do we enable those users to be able to connect with us? Is always still continuing to be a problem. How do you think about those users? And then there's mobile context. Most of the systems that were built to enable commerce, those CRM systems or those sales systems are built basically 2 decades ago, and they were really built for a fixed landline kind of world and broadband. And data sells. The underlying pinnings of those systems just need to be updated and need to be addressed to be able to kind of bring that forward. And who better to have that rich conversation and understanding of the user than the carriers themselves.
Okay. Now you mentioned context. I think I'm hearing a lot of emphasis on context these days. From a lot of different venues. Whether you're talking about business intelligence, whether you're talking about being able to monetize the customer in different ways, monetize new services. And I'm curious what you see as the type of context that's most important for mobile operators, and what are some of the challenges related to getting, good context when you're talking, in a lot of cases, about disparate data sources.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, talk about a topic that's just the center point of data analytics, BI, big data. It's all about context. It's about the richness of that experience, and what I like to do when I talk to enterprises in particular is have that conversation around how do you think about your user? How do you think about engaging with that user in the richest possible experiences to be able to delight the customer? And where does that information come from? Context is everywhere. If you're in a mobile app, it's what page I'm on. If it's point of service data, it's what I've purchased before, or maybe that I'm in a store, right? So location is certainly an element of context. So the geospatial part of it, whether it be GPS or maybe it's something that's coming from a beacon, a Bluetooth, low energy type device. Those things are context, but it's even broader than that. It's things like what kind of a device you have, or what's the status of your account, or even what it is, who I am as being context, or my demographics or psychographics, my propensity to spend. All of that is data and is information that provides the context to deliver that richest possible experience for the end user, and that's really all of our goals. So when I think about it from the carrier side of it, and I look at data analytics, and big data being unstructured data or just large amounts of data, the carriers are rich in that information. And so as we think about the challenges in that space, certainly there's a harvesting problem. How do you think about that data? How do I get that data? How do I make it relevant? But there's also a really important conversation around putting the user at the center of that data and making sure that that user feels in control, so they're feeling like they're providing the access to their information and it's not being used without their consent. So when we think about the elements of context, every user expects context. Every user is looking for that experience that understands who they are, but they want to be in control. And I think that's the key element to take away from a conversation around context.
Okay. Now you mentioned that the difference between big data and large amounts of data. I'm curious as to how you see scale in enabling some of these systems to work enabling good information to come in. And when you're talking about an organization like a telecom operator, who are used to dealing with large amounts of data, but maybe not in the same ways that they're trying to deal with it now.
Yeah, the lines between the telecommunications operators and the IT companies have certainly blurred. And when you think about the assets that they need to be harvesting and the tools that they need to be using, they are data companies, right? I don't just draw a distinction necessarily between someone who's running a social network and someone who's running a real-time voice network or a real-time data network, right? It's all data. It's all ones and zeros. So I think the exciting premise around that is thinking about the technologies that are out there and looking at the workloads and then taking advantage of that information to deliver on that experience that customer is looking for. So when we think about the information and how do we get at that information and that data, we like to think about it as the real-time intelligence associated with it. And there's a process that we go through with working with companies, and particularly in carrier service providers, where we look at the trends and the activities and the information that's happening in real time to be able to make decisions around how to offer something to that user. So like, say, for example, someone who doesn't turn on their phone. 90+% of people typically don't turn on data roaming whenever they're out in the marketplace. But we want to deliver them an experience that's compelling. So how do we bring those things together and make a compelling offer to the user? And to do that, you've got to look at your different data sources and and subdivide that information so you can make these decisions that are happening in real time and to be able to deliver the functions. But as I look at the large amounts of data there, the other interesting part is that the relationship that we need to build between the operators and the enterprises. An enterprise is very challenged whenever they try to talk to multiple different companies and do multiple integrations. And I think that's one of the beautiful points of where Syniverse comes in as a trusted intermediary between operators and the enterprises to help the operators monetize their networks, increase their ARPU, and be able to deliver better experiences for their customers. Because the enterprises really don't have the assets, the time, the competencies, the experiences to do bilateral agreements globally. No one company represents 100% of the market. I don't care if you're the largest social network or the largest telecommunications network, you're still not going to represent everybody in every experience. And so, it's this community, I think, that is really exciting, and that really plays to the legacy and the history, from Syniverse, from our earliest days, 25+ years, where we've been delivering on that promise and that premise for, our operator customers.
Okay. Great. One of the other things that I wanted to touch on was SMS, and that's been a very basic service for quite a while in the mobile realm. I'm starting to hear more about application-to-person messaging as opposed to person-to-person messaging, and how we might start to see different avenues of monetization for operators, different services that incorporate at some level SMS. And might offer some new opportunities there. I'm curious as to what role you see SMS playing going forward, and what opportunities there might be on that front for monetization.
It's a great question, and what is old is new again, for sure, in that category. SMS is the workhorse of mobile. Everyone understands it. It's ubiquitous. It works on every phone. Fairly much, supports it. So it's an interesting space because when we think about it from an operator's perspective, there's kind of two elements to this. There's the monetization side of it. There's the reach side of it. And I guess really a third slide is you think about how do I manage that, and how do I manage access into my network in general as well. And so, from our standpoint, what we do is, we fill this role of, again, as an aggregator of bringing this context together and reducing the number of connection points for our operator customers, as well as for the enterprises. And so it's a win-win experience. But what we're seeing is, with this avalanche of mobile usage, again, Thanksgiving Day, more online traffic was mobile than there was, on the traditional landline side. What we're seeing happen here is that marketers have woken up and have seen this, the effectiveness of mobile, or I should say, of mobile, as well as the effectiveness of SMS. How quickly people read their SMS messages. I'm sure most people are, similar to me, and they prioritize SMS as actually the top message that I check. Right? Voicemail's way down here. I might get to that in a day or two. Right? Email's up on that list somewhere else. Push notifications are low. are interesting. SMS is, at its core, the most important message. And so we need to treat it as it is, a very intimate relationship with the customer, in the sense that that mobile device is so personal for people now. And SMS is the most important of all those messages. But as I think about how I interact with you, and I think about the transactional messages and promotional messages, but for the most part, you start thinking about things that are very important to me. My package was shipped, right? The awareness that my room is ready. These are great applications for SMS. Things like confirmation for your reservation. How important is it to make sure that the user is confirming that they're going to occupy your limited real estate that you have? It's incredibly important, and we're seeing great traction around SMS for that reason. It's global. Everyone understands how to use it. So it's one of multiple channels. And so when we talk to customers about it, and in the retail space, as well as travel and hospitality, financial services, sports entertainment also, to some degree as well, we see great traction and interest around engaging users, and SMS fills a part of that total connection point. But applications and push notifications. So does mobile web, right? It's always going to be there, as well as some interesting things like light applications that are coming up with things like Passbook. And so SMS fits in this category of this cross-channel communication of all digital channels. And it's interesting to me when I talk to the mobile marketers and marketers in general. We have this group of an organization called digital marketing. Well, those guys really should be mobile marketing. As a matter of fact, we should change Cyber Monday to Mobile Monday because it's all about mobile. Right? Everything is mobile. I consume it all on my mobile device. And I think that's an exciting opportunity for us to think about, how do we look at harnessing these assets that we have, deliver these rich customer experiences that meets that customer at the point of need, delivering that rich information that they need and that they want at that moment. SMS is a great tool for connecting me to other services. I send a text message with a shortened URL link, and I click on that link, and now I'm in these rich web experiences, right? Take you to the correct app store so that I can download your app, right? To be able to bring you into these experiences and then broaden the engagement and give you that rich experience that we're all seeking.
Yeah, I have to say, I was at Target doing my weekly grocery shopping yesterday. They have the signs up, text to, here's the number, and you get $10 off, and there it was. It's SMS.
Yeah, and you knew how to do it. You didn't have to be taught. You didn't have to download an application. You weren't worried about that application being, not used in a week or two. I mean, here's another question. Everyone is very interested in apps, and by all means they should be, because it's the richest engagement that you can have, right? If I can have you engage with me via my app, the information that I get, the information that you have, and the immersion that you have in that experience is unmatched. But at the same time, it's really hard to get someone to download an app. You go through that whole consumption process. It's lengthy, it's challenging, it's it's difficult. That's why we went to downloading apps and having them ship on the device, right? But I still have to train you how to use my app because they don't all work exactly the same. And it takes that learning process, and then it has to be compelling, and I have to continue to use it. How do I engage with someone before they have an app? Or when they've stopped using the app, or when they're not looking at the application? Because I don't prioritize my push notifications the same way I prioritize my SMS messages as a consumer. And so I think it fits that really important space, as you well pointed out, right? And, I know how to do this. I don't have to worry about the app being there, and yet I'm able to engage my users and deliver something that's very interesting to them. And on a mobile-originated message like that, your consumption rates and your conversion rates are fabulous for what we see in the marketplace.
Okay, great. I wanted to make sure that we touched on some of the work that Syniverse is doing with MasterCard. I know you guys had some news come out a little bit earlier this year, and I'm wondering kind of how that fits into this overall picture of, mobile and improving the customer experience, and I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about that.
Well, and it plays into the big data and the data analytics side of the conversation as well, because what we're using here and taking advantage of is, we've talked a lot about the promotional side or the transactional messages side, but there's also a large conversation to be had about how do we help enterprises with their operations? How do we think about that long-tail fraud experience, and how do we use context to help users not just have great experiences, but also protect users and customers in that process. So what we were doing with MasterCard, and as well with the carrier partners that we're involved with, is by looking at this space and saying, that phone is a very personal piece of your assets, right? You know where your phone is. Most people have a smartphone. It's never more than an arm's length away from them. So if we're able to know where your phone is and where your transaction occurred, we have a pretty good understanding as to whether or not you really made that transaction. And so that's what we're using this data for, is in a roaming experience. That's a real problem when people don't turn on their phones and they're not using their phones in that sense. So it plays into the space of the silent roamer and the other activities around having people use their phones. But in this sense, what we're looking for is we're looking at the roaming data, and being able to look at that information and then provide that to MasterCard so they can do things like help improve the customer experience by avoiding false positives. False positives where I shut your phone off even though you are a legitimate user, right? That's pretty horrible customer experience, right? I'm ready to buy something. I'm one of your most important users. I'm traveling and I'm using my card, and now I'm not going to allow you to do that. That's a pretty horrible customer experience. So what we're able to do by working again with the carrier partners and MasterCard is be able to deliver a more seamless, less friction-based consumption process. And in this sense, provide security in the same time and protect the consumer and the outcome. And so that's what we're doing with MasterCard, and it's super exciting to be able to do that. And again, look at the other half of the ledger. So of course you look at the transactional side, the customer service things, the promotional elements, but then also address the fraud opportunities, or the potential of damaging customer experiences, by delivering these rich customer experiences that are based upon data and context, and harnessing that information that the operators have, in their network, and providing them an opportunity to monetize that.
Okay. All right. Well, we've touched on a few different areas here: retail, big data, business intelligence, as well as some of the ins and outs of roaming and mobile and the customer experience. I'm wondering if you can kind of tell us a little bit about more of the major trends that you see now, and how you see some of these areas evolving as we move into 2015.
Sure. I think mobile is the major trend, right? You look at the disruption that technology has caused, and mobile is to the internet what the internet was to brick and mortar. I mentioned earlier the data schemas themselves, the underpinnings of these big enterprise systems have to all evolve. It creates really interesting opportunities in the marketplace for new entrants and for existing players to remake their businesses and focus in on customers. The consumption process for the consumers themselves, right? How I live and how I expect, broadband on the move. Who would have thought that was even going to be possible, right? That we're having mobile broadband and watching videos and having advertisements that are as rich as they are on a TV on my mobile phone as I'm rolling around. The smartphone penetration and the 4G network implementations create a very interesting opportunity where we can take existing business models and transfer them to the mobile space. And I think that gives us the opportunity to see the mobile marketing spend explode. And I think that's where we're going to see one of the major things. We did a number of thinking about what do we think is going to happen in the marketplace, and I said mobile marketing was going to double in the coming year. I think that's probably understated now. As you see the numbers that came out of Black Friday, right, with more than half of the total time spent being on mobile devices, it's clear that the consumer has spoken, and tablets and smartphones and broadband networks on the mobile side are how people choose to engage. Mobile context cannot understate the importance of delivering on helping people understand who they are, where they are, and people, in a sense, enterprises, right? So that those offerings that are being made to the customer, or those experiences that are being produced, are rich, and they're understanding the consumer, and that they have low friction in them, so that that consumer isn't frustrated by the process, but rather they're delighted. I think those are the big things that we kind of see. Channel is another huge opportunity for us as we think about delivering these experiences in multiple different avenues, whether it be via the web, light applications, native applications, or some other form like SMS or MMS perhaps as well. We've seen additional traction around that again because of the ubiquity and because of the reach around that. I think we're going to see some interesting elements of this as it relates to geography. And you look at what's happening not just in the urban cores, but as we go out beyond that in the U.S. marketplace, and then more broadly, you start thinking about the Americas, and as well, what's happening in Europe and in Asia, and even in Southeast Asia and some of these growth markets that we're seeing coming along. I think that very interesting conversation for the network equipment providers as they think about the two dynamics that are happening in the network speeds and in the smartphones, and that the two endpoints, right, be growing in concert together as they think about how those markets expand, to be able to deliver, again, these incredible experiences that users are very quickly coming to expect.
Okay.
And so I think an opportunity for us in that.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Well, I've been talking with Rob Hammond, Senior Director of Enterprise Mobility Services at Syniverse. Rob, thanks so much for the conversation.
My great pleasure, Kelly. Anytime.